Hi everyone, I hope you're well. So starting with chapter 2, we're going to go into variables and arithmetic operators. So in the previous video I touched a little bit about integers, strings, and I think I only touched on those. But you can see here we're going to work with integers and strings, and we're going to learn about the rest of them. So for this activity, before we start with this, it's just really important that we just get this here. So a variable is something that identifies data that can be changed during the execution of a program. Most of these things will start making sense when we start using them. But just to show you quickly, idle. So at the start of a program, so this is my program, and then say data. So at the start of the program, do you remember when we did in the first activity, we said name is equal to the input, whatever the user put in as their name. Remember we did something like this. I just have to save this. Just going to save this as my program data dot py program, and I'm just going to put it here, documents. You do not need to do this. This is just to show you what you have done. You already have worked with this a bit. You actually made a variable called name, and this is the data assigned to that name variable. So when we say print name John Claude, it's going to print out this string type. And if you said number 1 equals input of number 1, and I'm just going to do the same thing for number 2. All of these are the variables, okay, and we're just assigning some values to them from the user. And if I say print number 1 plus number 2, okay, this has to be exactly the same, number 1 plus number 2. Okay, so we're going to get 2 inputs from the user. We're going to get their, let's just take that away. Let's take the name away. Okay, so user starts the program. Okay, what's number 1? Let's say 5. What's number 2? 2. Now the answer should be 7. So they just added these two because like physically put them next to each other. If we wanted to do an operation with them, then we can just say I might still be thinking of C# right now. I think we have to add in another one, the other one for Python. Whoop! Whoops! They're saying it's strings, so oh, you know what? I just wanted to say how important it is to know the data types, but I made a mistake. We need to convert these into integers, which is just whole numbers. I believe if we do this, it should give us the right answer now. Okay, so if we didn't put it as an integer, you saw that it just takes the number and puts it next to the other number. Okay, so it's going to print 2 numbers there. So one, here we go. Okay, so 5 and 2. So the one is literally just adding the two string values together, which is 5 and 2. And the other one is actually converting them into numbers. Even though we as humans, we can see that 5 and 2 are numbers, the computer reads them as string values. So that's why they're just being added like this. But if we actually wanted to add them, we had to change this. Okay, so you know what a variable is. We assign values to the variables. If you wanted to, you can just say 5 and 2. Okay, so these are constants. So number 1 is a constant. It's always going to be 5. Number 1 is always 5. And number 2 is always 2. Now let's see what happens if I print this, because I believe it's going to automatically detect that this is a number and not a string. So let's just see what would happen if, I think we're just going to have 2 7s. Yeah, it's going to have 2 7s. Python has a built-in identifier, so it's going to decide for us. It's called a loosely, what do they call it? Loosely, I had a good word here somewhere for it. A loosely typed programming language. Okay, so in other programming languages, I remember in school we did something called Delphi. Every time we had to initialize or declare a variable, we had to say this is a integer, or it is a string, or it is a boolean, or it is a real. Okay, so we had to declare that. But Python, the cool thing about having a loosely let me just get that word again, loosely programming language, right? Loosely typed programming language. The cool thing about this is when you make a algorithm for pseudocode, it's very similar to Python. So most of the time, if you have a algorithm written correctly in algorithm language, you can basically copy and paste that in here, change a few things, and then your code should work. Okay, so if I were to change these into strings, okay, so now it's going to be a string, which just means it's a text. Now it's going to be 5, 2, and 7. Or the other way that you can change something into a string is you can just put it in parentheses. Okay, there we go. And it still does the same. Okay, so by default, Python knows that if we put in a number there, that it's going to be a number, but if the user types in a number, then it's a text. Okay, so on that, okay, so a variable identifies data that can be changed during the execution of a program. Okay, we changed 5 and 2 into 7. Okay, so the thing that we changed here was when we printed this addition of the two numbers. Okay, so that will be changed during the execution of a program. A constant is used for data values that remain fixed. Okay, so the last thing I just showed, these are constants. Okay, this is a constant. This variable is a constant because it's always going to be 5. It's always going to be 5. If I asked it just to print number 1, it's just going to print number 1, which in our code, is the number 5. Okay, so the actual number 5. A constant is used for data values that remain fixed. In many computer languages, the data type must be provided when declaring or initializing variables. Okay, so what we just did here, we declared our variables. This is what we did here. Here we're doing some computing that our program does. It's really nice to have some space between the different sections. If you don't like organizing things, try to read an unorganized coded program. It's a mess. You have something called spaghetti coding. So if you do not want to be known as the person who makes spaghetti code. You want it as neat as possible. Yeah, so this is where you declare, and usually when we declare or initialize variables, we do it at the very start of the program. Later on, when we do functions, you'll do your declarations inside of the function, but usually they are also done at the start of the function. So let's say this was our function. Then at the start of the function, we'd say that we say I equals 0. So that's our variable. So inside of our computing function, say this was a function being called, inside of that function, I'm just going to put this here. Oh, it doesn't need to be there. Okay, inside we have our declaration. So declaring. Okay, so that's where we declare the variables, and then after declaring variables, this is where we do, sorry about that, I'm back. Okay, computing. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. I'm just using these examples to make sense of what we're reading here. So the data type must be provided when declaring or initializing variables. So you know what declaration of variables means. It's literally just assigning a value to a variable. The data type is used by the computer to allocate suitable location in memory. These languages, such as Java, are said to be strongly typed. Okay, so here in Visual Basic, you can see that dim score as integer equals 0, and this is what you have to write to assign the 0 number, because it's an integer, to score. You have to type all of that, but in Python you can just say I have a score variable and I want to assign the value 0 to it. Now it automatically in Python assigns it as an integer value, unless, as you've seen, you say that you want it as a string, or unless you tell it I want it as a string. So there's more than one way to do that. So sometimes you do want a specific value to be a string when using numbers. Let's say, for example, you're gonna have a list of possible what do you call it, country code, and this one will be called South Africa. Okay, so our country code in South Africa is +27, and then if you want a country code for Namibia, so Namibia, then it will be 684, I think, I can't remember, 682, I think it's 682. Okay, so this would be a number that we don't want to do any calculations with. We just actually want this over here. So if somebody asks, if you had a program that asks somebody's number, and one of the fields it said from which country are you, then we would have something like if country equals Namibia, then it will say, okay, so the country code is going to start with this +27. So we can just say, okay, so it equals that. So if that's true, then the country code equals the Namibian one. Okay, so that would be a declaration that we usually do before the program starts. I hope I'm not confusing you. I'm just trying to think of examples of where you would use a number that's not supposed to be an actual number. Like, it's not supposed to start with that. We don't want to do any calculation with it. We just want to keep it as a string. So then the number that they type in, then we just say print country code. Okay, so it's gonna print the country code +682. So it's gonna put it in that value, and then whatever the user input number was. So if they typed in the number under user input in a field, 081284 blah 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 blah, if they typed in that, then the result would be like that. Okay, so yeah, we can also put in put in the text. Okay, so this is what would be printed. So you don't have to ask the user. It's just nice if some programs do that for you sometimes. Just like I forgot the phone code. I'm sure it's that one, but you get the idea. So I just wanted to show you an example of where you would initialize or declare a variable that seems to be a number, but it's actually a string. Yeah, so I hope that makes sense. Okay, I just want to get rid of that. Okay. Okay, so although loosely typed languages are easy for the programmer to write, it is still important to be aware what data type your variables contain. Okay, so I just showed you why it was important. I tried to use the example to make sense of that, but it's really important that you know what a variable is, you know what a constant is. Data type, we're going to go a bit more into the different data types, but you'll see that these are the only data types. You don't have to worry about anything else. Like we're just going to work with basically numbers, characters, normal sentence, words, strings. Boolean is literally just yes or no, true or false. Okay, so those are the only data types that we'll be using. So just know that in our programming language, and the one that you're mostly going to use in Cambridge, in Python, we're going to use the same as in pseudocode. So Python and pseudocode is very similar. Okay, so types of data. How can we know what type of data has been allocated by Python in our programs? Okay, so let's say I know that it's supposed to be an integer. This is supposed to be a number, but I'm not sure if it is. So let's take this away. We know that this is going to print the addition of these two numbers. Okay, it's not necessary for me to write integers anymore, but if I make them strings, it's going to show me, oops, it's going to show me that they are both strings. And if I print this, you'll see that we have number 1 and then both of them added together. Okay, so just for in case, we can just do this just so that we know what it is that we're seeing. Okay, so you'll see now, oops. You'll see now that number 1 is 5. Okay, and then we can just copy this. We can say this is just so that we can see what was written in the code. So number 1 is equal to 5, and int number 1 plus int number 2 is 7. So we can even put in a little equal sign here just to show that we're doing a calculation. Oh yeah, so now the thing is we need to know what type of data we're working with. So what type of data would number 2 be, and what type of data would number 1 be? Okay, so we can ask the computer to show us. So number 1, we can see, since it is in parentheses, this is a string, so it's seen as letters and words. And number 2, nothing is there, so this should be an integer. So to see what it is, we can just say print, and we're going to do that 2 times because we want to see what number 1 and number 2 are. So I'm just going to double click. Then we can just say, what is the type? So the type of data. Okay, let's see what they tell us. Oh wait, we should not print that, my bad. Type is not defined. Oh, my bad. Okay, And we did want to print that. My bad, I'm not focusing right now. Okay, so the class that the first one fits in for number 1 is str, which is short for string. Number 2 is an integer. Okay, so we have this textbook over here. What is an integer? It's whole numbers. What is a string? It's more than one character, a string of characters. So used to hold words, names, sentences, also punctuation, numbers as text. It's basically, it's seeing that as a bunch of letters. Okay, so this is a really nice thing to see. Let's say you had a problem with, which one is not a, let's do this. So let's not change that into an integer. Let's say you didn't know that the program is going to bomb out here. Okay, I did this on purpose. I took away the number 1 transition into an integer because I know it's a string. But let's say you didn't know that. Now they say over here, number 1 plus integer number 2. The type error can only concatenate a string, not integer to string. Okay, so something here is not right. We don't know what the data type is. One of them is of the wrong data type. By the way, concatenate just means that you add things together. So I'm going to concatenate 2 and 7. That gives me 27. I'm going to concatenate the word happy and meal. That is concatenated. And if I want to concatenate the word happy meal as 2 words, then I'm going to concatenate it with the word happy, with a space, and meal. So there's 3 things that I wanted to concatenate. It's just a fancy way of saying combine. Okay. Oh yeah, so now I would use this print type number 1. Show me what type of number is number 1. Okay, and we just saw that it's a string, and we just saw that number 2 is an integer. Now, we know that if we add 5 and 2, it's going to be 7, but it won't work because the computer doesn't see it like that. It sees this 5 as letters. Okay, I know it doesn't see it as those many letters, but it's assigning that value in its computer language, where we work with ones and zeros. It's allocating that to a part in its brain where the letters go, which doesn't make sense to it. So it can't do any addition or subtraction from here. So we need to tell it, okay, so please just go put that in your other part of your brain where you do your maths. Okay, so let's see what would happen if that happens. And now it works because now both are integers. Okay, so I just wanted to show you the data type, how you would use it. It's not the best example, but just with what we just did, that should work. So we can just study this interactive session in the Python shell to see how we use this function. Okay, so we can just keep on here in the, I'm just gonna restart shell. Okay. Let me just close this. Idle. Okay, so we're in the shell, and they say, okay, we're gonna declare an integer, my integer. I'm just gonna copy it because we're going to use it, so I don't make a spelling error. My integer equals 3. Okay, so that's my integer. Now I want to know what is the type of my integer. Now they tell us it's of the class int, which means integer. And now I'm going to type in my string equals hello. Now if you declare a string, it must be inside of parenthesis. Okay, and now we just want to know what is my string type, and it is of the class string. Okay, so that's actually all we had to do for this. I know I explained maybe way more than I needed to, but I really like to make sure we have everything. It's gonna be a quick upload for this. Just want to get my taskbar doesn't want to show. There we go. Okay, so it's literally just that file save as. It's gonna be a PDF, and we're going to save this as. Let me just check. 2.1 to 2.2 data. I'm just going to type that out. 2.1 to 2.2 data, and we're saving it as a PDF. Save it, and that's what you can upload onto that assignment over there. I hope that helped, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.